NBA.com. It is the one, the only Steve Aschburner. Steve, how are you this afternoon, my man?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Doing well. Before I get into your impressions of Keegan Murray from the Summer League, what was your opinion of the Keegan Murray pick when the Kings made it, and a lot of people around here and elsewhere screaming that it should have been Jaden Ivey?
Well, I'll tell you what I tell people the week of the draft and the days leading up to that is that I don't really follow college basketball until they hit the NBA. The draft is sort of my introduction to these guys.
Sure.
And so then Summer League is really my first glimpse. I watch so many NBA games during the basketball season that if I sat down on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon to watch college hoops, my wife would have something to say about that. So I limit myself mostly to so I really didn't have a feel for it. I had interviewed Keegan Murray a month before the draft in a Twitter Spaces thing that we had set up, and had done some homework on him, and just read his story, which was impressive, and how mature he came across in that interview. But then I finally got to see him a couple of games at Summer League. So I didn't have too much of an impression before then, but I do now.
How much of an impression can you get from the Summer League, Steve? And however much it is, what were your takeaways on Keegan Murray?
Yeah, I know what you're saying in terms of the quality of competition, and you're not really in a system, and everything is kind of a meatball set up, especially offensively. But even just the slightest things can impress. I remember when Tyler Hero was a rookie, and I was there early before one of the Heat's early games in Summer League, and just the way that kid moved and the ease with which he ran and elevated and shot the basketball at the top of his leap. I mean, it's just like, man, there's something special there, and I think that's proven out. I mean, I'm not a scout, I'm not a coach, but you can see things. And with Keegan Murray, I mean, it's just, to me, he exuded maturity. He looked like a guy who was a couple of years more advanced than most of those players out on the court when he was playing. And I know he does have experience, and I think that's a good thing. He's just a smooth shooter, and obviously that's going to translate, in my opinion, to the NBA. And he ends up as MVP of the Summer League, and that's no shock based on what I saw in the games I saw him.
As much as maybe more than anything in his actual game itself, Steve, you just touched on the maturity. The maturity, his just cool, calm, cold-bloodedness, whether it was talking to you guys in the media or putting up shots when the clock was running down, that seems like something pretty extraordinary for a guy getting his first taste of professional basketball.
Yeah, especially in this day and age when the experience level is rather limited, one and done, or they play in the G League at the Ignite elite team, you get that sort of stuff. So I think in this case, I mean, sure, it does stand out that the guy looks like he's ready to embrace, not just the NBA game, but life as a professional and the obligation to his employer that goes with it.
Talking with Steve Aschburner, senior writer for NBA.com. What did you make of the rest of the moves that the Kings made this offseason? Bringing in Herter, bringing in Malik Monk. How much better do you think this Kings roster is than it was a couple months ago when their season ended?
Well, I think they have talent, but they've had talent for a while. I mean, it's just a matter of when you have good draft position year after year after year. I mean, that you're gonna stockpile talent. You have to develop a pecking order. You've got to get guys to play together in a system that works for the group at large. I have to admit I'm still a little bit surprised. I'm a fan of Domantas Sabonis, but I was also a fan of Tyrese Halliburton. And Tyrese Halliburton, he exuded a lot of what I see in Keegan Murray, and those would be two tremendous pieces. But we'll see how that works long term. They have plenty of talent. I cover the Minnesota Timberwolves, so I know a little bit about a team that can't get out of its own way in many cases. And the Kings are going to figure that out at some point I do believe.
And there have been some, maybe a host who you're talking to right now. I saw Mark Spears on ESPN go as far as to say this Kings team, they might be a playoff team. It doesn't sound like you're ready to go that far just yet. Looks good on paper is what it sounds like you're saying, Steve, but still a lot of practice to put in place before this thing actually pans out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think you've got, four teams that are kind of avowed lottery-bound teams in the Western Conference with Utah, San Antonio, OKC, and maybe Houston, depending on what they get out of all those young players. But that leaves you 10 teams for that'll get you to the play-in spot if you're a team like Sacramento. But it's a pretty tough gauntlet to run with some of those teams like Denver and Memphis and Golden State, obviously, and the Clippers roster. And I expect some sort of bounce back from the Lakers. They can't have another season like they had. So it's possible. I mean, the ingredients are there. It's just a matter of where do they draw on for their success? Are they able to have a real productive preseason and preseason games and training camp? And then somehow do they, get propelled a little bit into the regular season, have success, and then get a little momentum? I mean, they're going to have to start well early, I think, to avoid bad habits.
Talking with Steve Aschburner, NBA.com. Want to get your thoughts on some things going on elsewhere in the league before I let you go here, Steve. You just brought up the Lakers. What do you think is the ultimate resolution to that thing? We hear conflicting reports that there's no way Russell Westbrook can stay there and coexist with the people in place. And then we hear today that Westbrook, LeBron, and AD all got on a phone call and committed to winning a championship in a Lakers uniform. What are you hearing? What's the feel you get for how that situation resolves itself?
Well, if it's the latter that you described, I'd be all for that because, I mean, that's what professionals are supposed to do. And, LeBron wanted Russell Westbrook. Now you're going to say he doesn't want Russell Westbrook. I mean, I liken that to the whole Durant and Kyrie Irving thing out in Brooklyn. I mean, I think the best situation is for all those players to stay where they are, commit to this season, and show us something, And it was something that appealed to them when they got together in these groups. And, they couldn't run. I mean, for Kevin Durant to ask for a trade when he hasn't even drawn a dime on his new contract extension is about as embarrassing as I can recall in quite a while. I mean, that's just... And then, of course, he wants to go to a contender. He doesn't want to go somewhere and build it up. Now, if they traded Westbrook for Kyrie Irving, that would be equally interesting to watch. So, I'd be okay for that, to see Durant and Westbrook and see if they could put it together again after a big, long gap. And Irving, and LeBron, but they might just be best off, with the crew they have, and see what Darvin Ham as the new coach there can bring to it. And if I'm Brooklyn, there's no way I trade Kevin Durant when you've got him for 4 more years. So that to me is like a non-starter. So we'll see. I think both those teams can make some noise in their respective conferences.
And are you surprised that Kevin Durant is still a Brooklyn Net? I know when I saw that he'd be on the trading block, that it would be a bidding war in just a matter of time before somebody won it, and we'd be talking about Kevin Durant's next stop.
No, I'm not surprised. I think Brooklyn has made it clear they want to do what's best for them. So they're not going to cower and send Durant somewhere where he can chase a ring, and then they're back down in the dumps. I mean, that just doesn't make sense to me. I'm glad to see management of some team draw the line. I don't believe that players under contract should be able to make noise and fuss their way to a team, that they prefer. I think you have an obligation to put your name to paper. So, that's old school, whatever. That's just where I stand. So I'm glad that he hasn't been traded yet. I also think there's a problem with the price tag. When you look at what Minnesota gave up for Rudy Gobert, 4 first-round picks, a pick swap, a guy who was drafted this year in the first round, some decent role players, and now that's just for Rudy Gobert, who's mostly known for playing one half of the floor. Now you're going to top that for a better player with Kevin Durant? Or, I don't know how you do that. I mean, just that becomes prohibitively expensive. And I think that Utah-Minnesota trade set a floor for the cost of a star player.
That's Steve Aschburner. Check out his work at NBA.com, on Twitter at AshNBA, and my guest for the last few minutes here on Cattles and Ramie. Always appreciate the time, Steve. Thank you so much, man.
You got it. Bye-bye.
There's Steve Aschburner joining me to talk some NBA, some Kings. He likes what the Kings are doing, just not quite ready to jump on the bandwagon and go as far as